Nazi economy.
Okay, this is chapter 7 from Lee on the Nazi economy. Chapter basically started out talking about how in Hitler, between 1935 and 1936, was faced with the economic crisis. When this happened, he introduced what was called the Four-Year Plan to try and pull Germany out of depression. This essentially consisted of plans to rearm the nation of Germany, so kind of give a boost to German industry. Under this plan, the military budget went from 1.9 billion to 18.4 billion dollars. To assist in these projects, trade unions were replaced with what was called Strength Through Joy, or the KDF, and Beauty of Labor, the SDA. By 1939, unemployment had been reduced to insignificant levels, and as a result, the German military became prepared for war. Weimar Germany was at the time the first country to enter the Depression, and Nazi Germany was the first to emerge. However, some believe that this was due largely to previous policies and investments of Hitler's predecessor. Some people believe that the German economy had been severely distorted as a result of rearmament. The rapid fall in unemployment created severe labor shortages. The consumer-based economy was severely curtailed by annexations of Austria and the Sudetenland, as well as Bohemia. There was no real underlying economic component to Nazi ideology. This differs greatly from Marxism, which is a notion of political change occurring through dialectical struggle of the different classes. Hitler laid out some economic ideas in Mein Kampf. First of all, God bless you, he wanted to make the German economy self-sufficient. Secondly, he intended to target, above all, lands to the east of Germany. Number 3, this involved expansion and conflict. The economic infrastructure would have to support a large increase in military spending. And number 4, he could not risk losing the support of the German people and could not risk severely damaging their standard of living. He based all this on territorial expansion and self-sufficiency, or Lebensraum, and I'm not even going to attempt that. Autarky. In particular, Lebensraum provided the infrastructure for Hitler's ideas concerning the ultimate purpose of his economic changes. The only way Germany could grow from limited mobilization was by steadily expanding its economic base through a series of rapid and specifically targeted conquests. This method became known as Blitzkrieg and was as much an economic strategy as it was a military one. Hitler was also preparing the economy to sustain total war, but the outbreak of war with Britain and France in 1939 was premature, which meant Germany could only support blitzkrieg strategies rather than total war. Overall, the economic situation was still poor by 1939. Unemployment did drop and wages increased, but the cost of living rose dramatically. It turns out that the economic situation was still marginally better in 1933 when Hitler took office. The input that workers had into the economy was substantial, but largely one way. It fed into rearmament, but the people received few consumables in exchange. Many of the jobs that reduced unemployment were artificial in nature. Germans were hired to work on public projects such as the Autobahn. Others were employed through compulsory labor, which usually lasted for a duration of 6 months. Heavy industry and rearmament had to come before the most basic consumer requirements. Göring made a statement saying that the citizens of Germany should, quote, place guns before butter. German consumers suffered in two ways: the imposition of tight import controls and the huge drop in consumer goods from abroad. The KDF and SDA proved to be a poor substitute for trade unions. People were employed, but their freedom was restricted when it came to choosing what jobs they wanted. This level of control is strikingly similar to that of the Soviet Union during the same time. The final productive outcome of the four-year plan between the years 1933 and 1938 were as follows. The production of consumer goods rose by 69% in Germany. However, industrial war goods increased by 389%.
Do we have some questions? None? All right, go ahead.
Mark, so you're saying that 1933, the time was the same as 1933?
So basically, wages went up, but the cost of living went up at the same time. Yeah, essentially. Yeah, I mean, people had jobs and their incomes were going up and everything, but the cost of living was going up and up, even though that was something Hitler didn't want to have happen.
So Hitler's policies were you would say they were cosmetic? Was there a benefit? I mean, maybe to the average person, I now have a job. I didn't have a job before. I now can buy these goods, but they cost me more. But I suppose, there was inflation. There would have been inflation without the jobs, probably as well. I mean, there was great inflation in the 20s and the early 30s leading up to this.
I think it said in the chapter too that there had been efforts that were made prior to Hitler coming into office to deflate the currency.
Sure.
And everything. But the biggest thing was probably just the cost of living went up along with wages going up as well.
Okay. All right, anything else? Okay. Very good. I thought that was very good. I liked, you didn't say anything about your all your extra stuff on here. Let's see. So if we just, what I might do is just flip through this and make a few comments myself, rather than interrupt you while you're doing it. Certainly Germany faced economic troubles, but they were not alone. The whole world, really, certainly the whole Western world, had huge economic problems in the 30s, including the United States with the Great Depression. this 4-year plan, I thought it was interesting. They got rid of the trade unions and started these new organizations because trade unions are more communist. I mean, they could be associated with communism. And of course, what Hitler had done, or what the Nazis have been able to do, was to make enemies out of the communists. Perhaps they were somewhat enemies anyway, and to blame them. It's always good to have someone to blame. That's why, I always look to you to blame, and you always look to me to blame, so we can all have someone to blame, right? Yeah. You can blame the person in charge, you blame whoever. And we're looking for somebody to blame. But these unions, these trade unions, did start. It would be an extra government organization. They call them non-government organizations today. NGOs is what they call them today. That could organize people, and I think they wanted to avoid that. And so we see one of the main concerns a lot of people had at this time, not only here in Germany but elsewhere, was employment. It's demoralizing. I guess maybe our society has reached the point today that people prefer not to work. At least some people prefer not to work and rather just get free stuff, right? But for many people, at least in the past, I don't know about today, because I study history, I don't study current things as much, but I do comment on them occasionally. Not working, not having a job, not being productive is demoralizing. Okay, so I think that personally, I think it goes all the way back to the way we were created. We were created to work. Work is not a punishment. There was work in the garden before there was sin in the garden. So we don't have to work because of sin. Right? Well, yeah, I mean our situation we do get tired, and since the fall we have not only our work is complicated. It's more complicated, right? Not only by us getting tired, but by just obstacles that come our way.
And also since we always want to blame someone else.
Because the key verse there is by the sweat of your brow. Now by the sweat of your brow you'll get food. In the garden originally they just went and there was food was there. Now by the sweat of your brow you will eat. You see? So you're going to have to put sweat. We call it sweat equity now, right? You have to work for it. But people were demoralized, and so by basically fabricating jobs, some benefit may have come from these jobs. But this happens also in the United States. There were fabricated jobs under Roosevelt. Works Progress Administration, the WPA, just created a bunch of and then what happens is you have deficit spending, right? You go out, and ever since then we've had deficit spending in the United States, I assume elsewhere in the world. We spend more than we take in. That's what deficit spending is. So if you earn, $30,000 a year, you spend $40,000 a year. Where does the extra 10 come from? You borrow it. And if you keep that up for your whole life, well, then you die, and then hopefully someone else will pay your bills when you're gone. So we run the government economy not the way that we would recommend people run their personal economy. Deficit spending. So he does this, and this does bring about employment, and I think that does change people's attitudes. The Weimar Republic is, as you put up here, the first to enter the Great Depression. I think, it would be hard-pressed to say that Germany was first and the United States was second. I think the impact of it was first in Germany.
And second in America.
Sure. Yeah, well, highly industrialized countries. So America, Germany, England, France to some extent, but France was not as industrialized. If you weren't as industrialized, in fact, the depression didn't hit you as hard because,
Russia was industrialized.
well, Russia was trying to industrialize. Certainly, the depression hit them. I don't think to the same level because they already had extreme government controls, and it affected their government and some of their plans, and certainly it affected the people, but not in the same way. Yeah.
They were also a dictator.
Exactly, yeah. Stalin had, it's interesting. Hitler is called the 4-year plan. Stalin had the 5-year plan. He implemented more than one 5-year plan. And in the United States, we had the New Deal and some variations of that. Some of that was deemed unconstitutional, by the way. But a lot of people were scrambling, and this Great Depression then hits Germany. I would say it hits Germany harder than anywhere else because Germany was already their economy was already so bad going into the Great Depression, whereas the United States economy was better, or at least seemed to be better, things were going better, then the Great Depression hits. But Germany, things were already bad, and then it got worse. Hitler, of course, blames everything on not only the Jews, I suppose, ultimately, but he blames the Weimar Republic. And we're going to see that the other thing that really wasn't, I don't know if you really mentioned it here, but I certainly would want to highlight is that as the Nazi economy, or as the economy in Germany goes, so goes the Nazi Party. So Hitler had tried to get things going in the 20s, right after World War I. But quite frankly, things were going not too bad. I mean, they had terrible war reparations and so forth. Germany was still in trouble, but so much money was being pumped into, you might say artificially, into the German economy that it didn't hurt people as much. But when the Depression hits, this is the real turning point. Fall of 1929, the house of cards falls down, or begins to fall, and everything gets pulled back. And so, in fact, when the economy tanked in Germany, that's when the Nazis took off. They had...
Because obviously, since they're during bad times, they can use this opportunity, doing like a devil uses, to brainwash people.
Well, yeah, I mean, I think you got a good point there. He does use the situation to his advantage. People are desperate.
Like a Nazi smell blood in the water,
Like piranha, huh? Yeah. Well, it's true. I mean, when the economy is bad, then the Nazi ideas are more appealing. Because what is Hitler's message? It's very simple. And by the way, all the great communicators have had simple messages. I mean, if you want to be a great communicator, if you want to motivate people, you've got to have a simple, recognizable message. And Hitler's message was simple. His message was that Germany had been betrayed. Germany was in trouble. Germany needed to change its course. It needed to put people back to work. It needed to bring dignity back to Germany. These were the kinds of things he would say. And, people were ready to hear it. Because, yes, Germany had changed. Germany was the leading, if not in the world, leading nation. Certainly in Europe. More universities than anywhere else. More technology. They had advanced quickly after their unification, and they felt they had a destiny there, and they were one of the top nations in Europe, and now they were basically the bottom nation. certainly in the West. Why had that changed? Well, that had changed after World War I. That had changed after the war reparations. That had changed after the Weimar Republic had sold out Germany. This is the way he would put it. Had stabbed Germany in the back and made this agreement. In fact, they even would say, Hitler and others would say, we could have won World War I. We could have won it, but we were sold out. Now, most people, I don't know too many people that believe that to be true. However, nonetheless, the Weimar Republic was blamed. So one of the projects, you have it up here, and you do mention it in passing, I just thought I would highlight it again, is the Autobahn. The Autobahn, there was nothing else like it. This was really, so I would say, revolutionary idea that's really caught on. Our modern interstate system is an imitation of the Autobahn, and it came about in the United States after Dwight D. Eisenhower, who had been the commander of the Allied forces in Europe, was so impressed by the road system in Germany, and he saw how efficient it was, and he saw the military purpose of it. And that's how the interstate system was born and how it was promoted, that this was for self-defense. We need to be able to move goods, troops, materials efficiently and quickly around the United States. We're such a big country. We need these developed highways that will make that system much more efficient. And so we see it here more than, I don't know, probably anywhere else in the world. Germany certainly still has quite a few Autobahns, but we have built millions of miles of interstates, and now it has become, the economic feature of our world. Yes.
Just going to add, now that you mentioned that we didn't have an interstate system during World War II, it just makes what the American people did during that time even more amazing. That they produced all this stuff and
we didn't have that. The only thing that, sort of the earliest thing that we had, it was, they had a turnpike. They called it in Pennsylvania, the Pennsylvania Turnpike, which was a toll road. They had to cut it through the mountains of Pennsylvania, and then they began to extend that. But no, we had a lot. Travel took a long time in the United States because we were so large. In our Connect group, I mentioned Kentucky Fried Chicken, right? The guy who started it along a U.S. highway. We don't pay much attention to U.S. highways now, but the U.S. highways were the way people traveled. And most of them were just 2 lanes, 2-lane roads, like 66, right? And 27, and other Highway 1, that's the 101. These were famous roads because that's the only way to go. It was the only way to go. Now, since the interstate system has been completed, it's never completed these days, but since it was initiated and developed, all those roads have become secondary roads to us. They were primary roads. Okay? So, but that came about because of Germany, and Eisenhower saw it. He said, this is a strategic thing for us. And so he was able to get it started during his administration. And of course, it just took off in the 60s and the 70s especially. And now it's just a way of life here. And it becomes now a part of economic. It also led to a lot of other things we don't have time to talk about, like flight from cities. People began to leave cities because of the interstate. You could now get on an interstate and get to your job quickly, used to be quickly, and you could live out in the suburbs where you had a nice yard and everything, and you didn't have to live in the inner city, or you have to live. So it really changed the dynamics of cities, and now we see people going back into the cities. Some people complain about that too, but they're going into these areas and they're fixing them up and they're living there. And so anyway, this interstate system developed on the Autobahn really finds its idea here in Germany. And it certainly is economic now, but it began as military and defensive thing. And it still really is. I'm sure there are military plans, and certain stages. You know, the interstate would be restricted to the military, or it could be used as runways for airplanes, military kind of thing, if need be. So you'd have these all over the country. So, you know, how much was this really Hitler's plan? How much was this really the plan of the Weimar Republic now kicking in? I suppose that's hard to say. But certainly the one thing is, as the economy goes, so goes the Nazi Party. The Nazi Party grew in its importance and its popularity in the early 30s, primarily because of the bad economy in Germany. I won't say only, but I mean, that was a big, big factor. And it had not really been growing much in the late 20s, although it had grown some, but it really begins to grow and becomes more a sort of more mainstream group, I guess you might say, if you can call Nazis mainstream. They were more mainstream, more popular with a larger group of people at that time. I find this statement interesting. You say, consumer-based economy was curtailed by annexation of Austria, the Sudetenland, and Bohemia. You say anything else about that?
Yeah, it was basically because they were expanding militarily, that everything had to go to military production.
Okay. So since the military is growing, we have to not worry about consumer products. Yeah. And you know, we see that kind of thing in the United States, especially during the war. But here it's starting before that. It's rationing. Sometimes it becomes rationing, not only in the United States, in Great Britain and even in Germany, of course. Of course, they have built-in rationing in the Soviet Union. I mean, you don't even call it rationing because it's already pre-rationed, or whatever you want to call it. But this is the idea that we're not going, like you said, I don't know where that comment is, maybe it's a couple slides away. Got to worry about, instead of butter, you got to worry about guns. Was it guns?
Yeah, Goering said essentially it's more important to focus on building guns than to worry about not having public.
Yeah. And so this, you know, and this is why I say that World War II was a total war. World War II was a total war. The United States, I think, has only been involved in 2 total wars. What would be the third?
Korea.
I don't think Korea was a total war.
It was a total war for both Korean nations.
Well, for Korea it was a total war. Sure, World War I was a total war for a lot of people, but I'm saying in the United States did not. A lot of people were not affected by the Korean War. Many people, they were not asked to ration. They were not asked to do many things like they did in World War II. So yes, in Korea, certainly Korea is a total war for the Koreans. Yes.
Was the American Revolution considered a total war?
You know, I don't put it that way, but you might make that argument. But I don't think so, because we didn't really have an America yet.
I don't want to get into it. The Civil War was a total war, especially when Sherman made as much as the sea.
Well, sure, the Civil War is definitely a total war, and World War II is a total war.
Well, Sherman really put the idea of destroying entire enemy economies by destroying all the railroads and burning down all the crops.
Sure. Well, that's the goal of many wars, to destroy the economy, to destroy the transportation, communications. But what I'm saying is that the United States experienced a total war in World War II and the Civil War. Those are the 2 that I see. You can make your arguments for others, I guess. But for Germany, obviously, they were in a total war in World War I. They were in a total war in World War II. And they never really got out of, I mean, you know, they had the interlude in Europe between World War I and World War II. It's a very different situation for them. And so, say here in the United States in World War II, we had rationing. For example, if you wanted to, today, if you want to go down and buy hamburger or steaks or whatever you want to murder things, go right ahead. I had a guy say that to me yesterday. We had the new opening of the new stuff over there, right? The backyard burgers and the Einstein bagels and the Papa John's right on campus. So I thought they were going to be giving away hamburgers. In fact, they were. So I was in line. I was the first person, I think I can say I was the first person who bought a hamburger from Backyard Burgers, because when it opened, I was the first guy in line. And when I went up there, I thought they were going to give me some samples or something. They didn't give me any samples. They didn't give me any coupons. I never got any of that. And the lady says, well, how can I help you? I said, well, like a hamburger. And then she charged me for my hamburger. I had to pay. So I thought, well, okay, I'll pay. And then I saw that they were back there making the hamburgers, and they were cutting them in quarters and putting them in little bowls, and then they were handing them out. They put them on big platters. And so this lady, so I'm standing there waiting for my hamburger because my hamburger's down the line. They're doing all this other stuff. I had to wait like 10 minutes to get my hamburger. I was the first customer, so I was like, they had to figure out the cash register and everything. I did. I camped out. I protested. Anyway, so then the lady comes and people want those hamburgers. And she said, no, you have to go outside to get the hamburgers. And so she made her way through the crowd, and she went outside, and but right after that was the first two trays, and then they set the next two trays out there for her, but she wasn't there, and I was standing right there. There's two big platters of hamburgers. So I picked them up, one in each hand. I'm holding them, and I turn around. There's all these people there, and I say, now, I'm supposed to take these outside. But, if I can't make it outside, and then it was just like a Walking Dead scene, because there's like 50 people, their arms out, they're all moving towards me, they're all grabbing the hamburgers, and there was one survived that was closest to me, and so I thought, okay, good, I'm really hungry, I'm going to eat this quarter hamburger here. And so I started eating it, and I put down the trays, and I turn around, and this guy's waiting in line in the Einstein bagels right there, because everything's all messed up, everything's all lined up. And he said, meat is murder. I said, so I thought, what? Is it really? I said, so it kind of, I was a little bit taken aback. I didn't expect it. And so then I said, what? He goes, meat is murder. Don't you know meat is murder? And so I said, well, yeah, I guess some people say that. I didn't really want to get into an argument with the guy. And then the guy behind him said, yeah, but it smells good. And this other person said, and it tastes good too. And so, I didn't argue. I was just eating my quarter hamburger because I was very hungry. But I was kind of surprised, to be honest with you, about that. But it's rationing. That was rationing right there. They're rationing out our food with The Walking Dead. So the idea here is that the German economy is failing. Hitler's trying to change that. Rapid fall in unemployment created severe labor shortages.
Basically, I guess everyone was just so effectively gotten rid of unemployment that they were like having shortages.
Now, well, and if you create sort of, I guess what we might call artificial jobs, then it affects the regular job market, right? So if I said, hey, we're going to go around and beautify the lakes of Lakeland, and we're going to pump all this government money in, you're going to go and build sidewalks around them or something. I mean, that's what a lot of these projects are. They would just sort of create something. You're going to make a path, you're going to make a sidewalk. In the United States here, the Works Progress Administration, WPA, they say, oh, we're just going to build a new school, put in some sidewalks. Do we need a new school? Well, maybe we do. But, I mean, so you put a lot of people to work, but it's going to be temporary. It's somewhat artificial because it's not coming from a real economic, no one has an economic investment in it, except for the United States government funds it. But, I mean, it's not as though we were trying to turn a profit or that sort of thing. Yes? They are. Yeah, China wants to keep their economy going. They've got a lot of money. They don't need it, so they've actually built entire cities that are pretty much unoccupied at the moment. Of course, with their population growth in China, they'll probably move in eventually. But yes, there are sort of ghost towns or ghost cities that have been created to just keep people working and to well, if you're a government like China is today, you're getting billions and billions of dollars, probably every day, but certainly regularly. And so what are you going to do with that money? They want to build infrastructure. Now, at first, they're building the infrastructure that's really needed. Now, we need to sort of keep it going because the economy over the world has actually slowed down. But China wants to try to keep it going so they can keep everybody working and so forth. So yes, it is somewhat artificial, and it can create shortages. No real underlying economic component to Nazi ideology. I suppose that's true, except they don't like communists. But they are socialists.
Yeah, it mentioned that. But it said in there that as time went on, they kind of went away from actual socialism type stuff.
Mm-hmm.
So that was just the government. It was more just government control.
Well, yeah, I mean, communism, I guess, communism and socialism, I think, are related.
Communism is just more hard.
Well, yes, communism is a more forced socialism, but the idea of socialism is that the government is going to run things, especially the economy, because for communists, for example, everything's about the economy. For socialists, I think most things are about the economy as well. It is somewhat the intensity and the amount of control.
Basically, just what they're seeing crocodile and same piece, different animal.
Well, I don't know about that,
The point is
but I will move on. So we see then that they saw the communists as their enemy, and they set them up as a kind of, we used to use the phrase straw man, someone to blame. And so everything that happens can be blamed. People like to blame others, but the communists were the focus of it. And part of the reason they were the focus of it, not only because communism was one of the biggest threats, the other group that was really surging when the economy is down were communists. Because basically the economy had been capitalistic, free market kind of economy, and basically the alternative many people saw to that was a communist market where there was no free market at all. The government controlled everything, and then theoretically we all would get what we need, and we would all, have everything in common, that sort of thing. In practicality, of course, that hasn't worked that well. Communist governments have failed all over the world. So you're hard-pressed to find true communist states around. There aren't too many of them left. Even the Chinese are not a true communist state anymore, although they would be the largest with communist ideology. Cuba, I guess, would be one, but they're pretty much selling out, if you want to call it that. They're North Korea, yeah. I mean, these are what do they call it? Communist light, some of this stuff. It's not the same, maybe exactly. But at any rate, if you take a look at the world in 1950 and you take a look at the world in 2000, you'll see that communism took it on the chin in the late second half of the 20th century. They really surged. There was communism everywhere, all over continents like Africa, South America. You had China, the Soviet Union. It was all over the world, and it was rapidly growing. And now it is just sort of hanging on. I don't think it's growing. It's definitely greatly declined. I'm not saying it's completely gone, but it's there. So communism was the one that really was the other alternative people saw in Germany. And I think that's exactly why people in the Weimar Republic banked on Hitler, because they knew they could not control the communists. And if the communists got in charge, they would just get rid of the entire government, set up something different, and we'd have a revolution, and you'd have people being killed, right? And just a radical change. Hitler seemed less radical, less disruptive, and a better alternative to them. Sort of, I guess, the lesser of two evils. Certainly they would have rather done it without Hitler, I think. But it got to the point where they said, you know what? Germany's either going to become a communist state, like the Soviet Union, or it's going to become more like what Hitler's talking about. Well, I think there's a big difference between fascism and communism. There certainly is a big difference ideologically. No doubt about it. Huge difference. At any rate, that's why they went with Hitler. They thought they could control him. They thought he was a lot of talk and he wouldn't be a lot of action. They thought that he wouldn't deliver what he was saying, and a lot of what he was saying was about things they could agree with, like jobs and, maybe we did get a raw deal in World War I. Yes?
Does fascism, fascism had a lot of racism. How does that compare to communism?
Communism is not based upon racism, it's based upon classism. So I would say they discriminate against you based upon your class. If you are wealthy, if you own property, you are wrong and you need to not own it anymore, and you need to change the way you think about it because you're wrong thinking. So it's not based upon race, it's based upon class, but I think the totalitarianism of it is the same. In other words, there's not going to be allowed people to have this diverse economic ideas and be allowed to continue. That's going to have to be changed. We're going to have to re-educate you, maybe send you off to a camp so you can learn.
The end result is going to be saying that everybody's poor and suffers and dies.
Well, I think that's a bit simplistic, but I'm not going to argue it here. At any rate, that's what people saw, the two choices. And so I guess part of the thing I was commenting about your PowerPoint is your little additional, you got a cat over here. Yeah, a Hitler cat. And you got a frog. I guess that's a Hitler frog. Or a Nazi frog. An SS. Well, he's in brown now, so anyway. We see then that Mein Kampf, which we've already talked about, but we didn't really talk about the economic portions of it. And then your little pictures of Mein Kampf down there. Did you find that as one little picture, or is that?
Yeah, one little picture stack.
Yeah. You stack the pictures up yourself. Oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's what I'm noticing. That's what I'm commenting on. Then did you group them together as a group, or they're just all in there? Okay. All right, it's good. I'm just pointing it out. You went by with no comment, so. And most people, they're on the Facebook and texting people, so they don't know what's going on. I'm just pointing it out. So we see then that the idea here that Hitler lays out these ideas, and a lot of people didn't pay attention to what he said. And obviously, if they would have paid attention to it, or if they actually would have believed he could come through with it, it's like this is just a guy ranting, and we hear a lot of ranting. So, you just ignore the rants or not. Well,
what did they perceive as the difference? They still brutally suppressed their opponents.
Sure, everybody brutally suppresses their opponents if they get the chance.
It's like, what's the
It
difference
just,
between them and communists?
there's a big difference between them and the communists. The Nazi economy, and I like you put the Volkswagen here because this is Hitler's car. This was Hitler's dream. It's not ever mentioned in their advertising today, but this is a Nazi vehicle, especially the Bug. I mean, the Bug was the car, the people's wagon, the Volkswagen, was set up to be an economical thing during the Nazi Party, during the Nazi reign, and this is how Volkswagen got its start. Now they sort of rebranded themselves as luxury vehicles, but they were supposed to be economy vehicles. And the people were supposed to be self-sufficient. People were supposed to, obviously they wanted Lebensraum or living space. And so we see the economy then grows. I like this idea that you have that the Blitzkrieg is really an economic tool as much as a military tool. I think that's true. Capture what you have there and to use it. And so we see then, as you have here, that in 1939, what had, I suppose, had changed is that people did have jobs. Maybe mentally they felt better somewhat because they were being productive and working on these things. And so the unemployment was reduced artificially. I think really, in my opinion, government intervention in the economy only produces artificial results and are unsustainable in the long term, just economically and so forth. But that's certainly what we see here, and what Hitler was mainly interested in was gearing up for war. And so the things that they're really going to focus on are war, guns, and not butter. So if you got to do without your butter, but we get guns, and yes, the Soviet Union was coming at militarizing itself as well. That's what the 5-year plan was about under Stalin. But they were way behind on industrialization, more than the Germans. And so we see that the conclusion of all of this is that Germany will find itself with this sort of artificial economy, but now they're going to be in the midst of another war, and the war economy is going to kick in again in 1939. All right, remember, we don't meet on Friday, right? So